If you grew up in the 80s or 90s, you know exactly what it felt like to walk through those doors. The smell of fresh plastic, aisles that seemed to stretch forever, a Jeffrey the Giraffe mascot greeting you from every sign. And that feeling, that specific, unrepeatable feeling, that you were standing in the greatest place on earth. Toys R Us wasn't just a store. It was a childhood institution. At its peak, it operated over 1,500 locations worldwide, generated nearly $12 billion in annual revenue, and was the undisputed king of the toy retail world. Every kid had a birthday wish list that started and ended there, and then it was gone. Not slowly, not gracefully. Gone. Bankrupt. Liquidated. Doors locked. Shelves cleared. Thousands of employees out of work. Millions of kids and nostalgic adults standing outside darkened storefronts wondering how something so beloved could just disappear. This is the story of how Toys R Us rose to become a retail empire, and how a single business decision, made in a boardroom in 2000, set off a chain of events that no amount of holiday sales could ever reverse. The rise. The story begins in 1948 in Washington, D.C., where a man named Charles Lazarus opened a baby furniture store. He noticed something quickly. Parents buying furniture were also buying toys. So he pivoted. By 1957, he had rebranded entirely around toys and adopted a retail concept that was revolutionary for its time. A superstore model dedicated entirely to one category. The idea was simple and powerful. Instead of a small toy section in the back of a department store, Lazarus offered an enormous dedicated space with massive selection and competitive prices. Parents didn't have to hunt. Kids didn't have to settle. Everything was there, under one roof. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, the company expanded aggressively. By the 1980s, Toys R Us was a cultural phenomenon. The iconic jingle, "I don't want to grow up, I'm a Toys R Us kid," became one of the most recognized advertising slogans in American history. Jeffrey the Giraffe became as recognizable as Ronald McDonald. At its peak in the late 1990s, Toys R Us controlled nearly 25% of the entire U.S. toy market. 1 every 4 toy dollars spent in America went through their registers. They weren't just winning, they were the category. The mistake that changed everything. Here's where the story takes a turn most people don't know about. In the year 2000, as e-commerce was beginning to explode, Toys R Us made what seemed at the time like a smart move. Rather than build out their own e-commerce infrastructure, which was expensive and complicated, they struck a deal with a scrappy online retailer called Amazon. Toys R Us would sell their products through Amazon's platform. Amazon would handle the logistics. It seemed like a win. Toys R Us got instant online presence. Amazon got a major retail partner and inventory. But buried in the fine print was a problem. Amazon continued allowing third-party toy sellers on the same platform, direct competitors to Toys R Us, undercutting their prices, selling the same products. Toys R Us sued. They eventually won and exited the deal in 2004. But the damage was done. They had spent 4 critical years not building their own e-commerce capability. 4 years while Amazon was learning the logistics of toy retail, building customer relationships, and perfecting the fulfillment model that would eventually swallow the entire industry whole. Toys R Us never recovered that lost ground. The leveraged buyout. The Amazon deal was the wound. What happened next was the infection. In 2005, a group of private equity firms, KKR, Vornado Realty, and Bain Capital, took Toys R Us private in a leveraged buyout valued at $6.6 billion. In a leveraged buyout, the acquiring firms load the purchased company with the debt used to buy it. Toys R Us suddenly found itself carrying approximately $5 billion in debt and paying roughly $400 million per year just in interest payments alone. Think about what $400 million per year could have funded. Store renovations, a world-class e-commerce platform, marketing, innovation. Instead, that money was flowing out the door to service debt before a single toy was sold. Every year that Amazon grew stronger, every year that Walmart and Target expanded their toy sections, Toys R Us was fighting with one hand tied behind its back. Strangled by a debt load it never chose, and could never escape. The collapse. By the mid-2010s, the signs were everywhere. Stores that hadn't been renovated in decades. An e-commerce experience that lagged years behind competitors. Prices that couldn't compete with Amazon or big box retailers who used toys as loss leaders to drive foot traffic. In 2017, Toys R Us filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, hoping to restructure. They announced plans to close underperforming stores, modernize operations, and emerge leaner and more competitive. It wasn't enough. In 2018, they announced full liquidation. All U.S. stores would close. The shelves were picked clean by liquidation sales. The lights went off. 30,000 employees lost their jobs, and its 70-year-old American institution was officially over. Conclusion. The story of Toys R Us is not simply a story about a company that failed to adapt to the internet. It's a story about debt, about missed windows, and about how one bad deal can set off a decade-long chain reaction that no turnaround plan can outrun. Charles Lazarus, the founder, died in March 2018, just days after the liquidation announcement. He was 94 years old. He had built something that defined childhood for 3 generations of Americans, and he lived just long enough to watch it disappear. There is a version of this story where Toys R Us survives, where they build their own e-commerce platform in 1999, where leveraged buyout never happens, where they use their brand power and customer loyalty to compete in the digital age. That version didn't happen, but it almost did. And that's what makes this story so haunting. Some brands are too big to fail. Toys R Us proved that no brand, no matter how beloved, no matter how embedded in the culture, is too big to be brought down by bad financial decisions. If you grew up in a Toys R Us aisle and this story hit different, hit subscribe. Every week we cover the rise and fall of the brands, businesses, and economic moments that shaped the world you grew up in. No fluff, no jargon, just real stories told straight. And if you want to know how Sears, once the most powerful retailer in American history, lost everything to a changing world, that story is up next. You won't want to miss it.